Victoria! Hartwell's scream tore through the marble lobby when she saw the janitor kneeling over her 6-year-old daughter's broken body, his hands hovering too close, his face too near. 3 seconds later, she would realize her fury had just destroyed an innocent man's life and changed her own forever. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The scream that tore through the marble lobby of Sterling Enterprises was not the kind of sound that belonged in a place of polished perfection. It was raw, primal, and it came from the throat of 6-year-old Emma Hartwell, whose small body was crumpled on the gleaming floor like a discarded doll. Victoria Hartwell heard it from 3 floors up. She was in the middle of closing a $12 million acquisition, her phone pressed to her ear when that sound cut through every wall, every floor, every carefully constructed barrier she had built around her world. A mother knows her child's cry the way a sailor knows the sea. She didn't think, she just moved. The boardroom fell silent as she dropped the phone mid-sentence and ran. Her Louboutin heels struck the floor like gunshots as she burst through the glass doors and hit the emergency stairwell. Her heart was a war drum in her chest. 3 floors. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her tailored Armani suit jacket flying behind her like a cape. Her mind was a hurricane of terrible possibilities. An accident, a fall, an intruder. The building's security was supposed to be impenetrable, but nothing, absolutely nothing, was more important than the sound she had heard. Her daughter, her baby, her entire world. She exploded into the lobby, her eyes wild, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The scene before her froze her blood. Emma was on the floor near the fountain, her little leg bent at an unnatural angle, and kneeling beside her, his hands hovering near her small body, was a man in a blue maintenance uniform, a janitor. His face was close to Emma's, too close, and Victoria's vision tunneled into a single, burning point of protective fury. She didn't see his expression. She didn't see the concern in his eyes. She only saw a stranger touching her daughter. "Don't touch my daughter." The words came out like a whip crack, sharp and absolute. Every head in the lobby turned. The receptionist gasped. 2 executives who had been walking through froze mid-step. The janitor's head snapped up, his hands immediately pulling back as if he'd been burned. Victoria was already moving, crossing the 20 feet between them in seconds. Her entire body was a weapon of maternal rage. She shoved past him, dropping to her knees beside Emma, her hands immediately checking her daughter for injuries. Emma's face was wet with tears, her small chest heaving with sobs. Victoria's voice was ice and fire. She didn't look at the janitor. She couldn't. If she looked at him, she might do something she would regret. Her hands moved over Emma's arms, her shoulders, checking for bruises, for blood, for any sign of harm. Emma's leg was clearly hurt, twisted beneath her in a way that made Victoria's stomach lurch, but she needed to know everything. She needed to understand what had happened in the seconds before she arrived. The janitor had stood up, backing away with his hands raised, palms out, a gesture of surrender. "Ma'am, I didn't. She was running and she slipped. I was just trying to help her. I didn't touch her. I swear I didn't touch her." His voice was steady despite the fear in his eyes, a deep, calm voice that might have been reassuring in any other circumstance. But Victoria was beyond reason. She was a mother in crisis, and every instinct she had was screaming danger, security. Victoria's command cut through the growing crowd of onlookers. Her assistant Margaret was already there, phone in hand, her face pale. Victoria could hear her speaking urgently into the device. She gathered Emma into her arms, careful of the injured leg, and Emma clung to her, sobbing into her shoulder. "Mommy, it hurts. It hurts so much." "I know, babe. I know. Mommy's here. You're safe now." She pressed her lips to Emma's forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo, letting it ground her even as her fury burned white-hot. She finally looked up at the janitor. He was still standing there, his face a mask of shock and hurt. He was older than she had initially registered, maybe in his early 40s, with dark hair that was graying at the temples and eyes that were a startling clear brown. There was a name tag on his uniform, Marcus. She didn't care. He was a threat. He had been too close to Emma. That was all that mattered. 2 security guards arrived, their boots heavy on the marble. The head of security, a no-nonsense former police officer named Davidson, took one look at the scene and immediately moved toward Marcus. "This man was hovering over my daughter," Victoria said, her voice cold and precise. She looked directly at Davidson, her CEO mask sliding firmly into place over the terrified mother beneath. "I want him detained until we understand exactly what happened here. I want the security footage pulled immediately. And I want to know how a stranger was able to get this close to a child in my building." Marcus didn't resist as Davidson took his arm. He just looked at Victoria with an expression she couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even fear anymore. It was something deeper. Something that looked unsettlingly like pity. "Ma'am," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Your daughter was chasing a butterfly. She was laughing. She slipped on the wet floor near the fountain. The cleaning crew had just finished. I saw her fall and I ran over to help. I called for medical assistance before you even got here. I never touched her. I wouldn't. I have a daughter. I understand." His words were like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples that Victoria refused to acknowledge. She turned away from him, focusing entirely on Emma. An ambulance arrived within minutes. The paramedics were gentle and efficient, carefully stabilizing Emma's leg and loading her onto a stretcher. Victoria climbed into the ambulance with her, never letting go of her daughter's hand. As the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of Marcus through the tinted glass. He was still standing in the lobby, flanked by security, watching the ambulance with an expression of profound sadness. Then the doors shut, and he disappeared from view. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and sterile smells. X-rays confirmed that Emma had fractured her tibia. It was a clean break, the orthopedic surgeon assured Victoria. She would heal completely with a cast in some time, 6 weeks, maybe 8. Children are remarkably resilient. Victoria sat beside Emma's hospital bed, holding her small hand as the anesthesia wore off. Emma's eyes fluttered open, still hazy and confused. "Mommy, where's the nice man?" The question was so unexpected that Victoria almost didn't process. "What nice man, sweetheart?" "The man with the kind eyes. He told me not to be scared. He said you were coming and that I was going to be okay. He stayed with me until you got there, Mommy. He didn't leave me alone." Victoria's breath caught in her throat. She looked down at her daughter's innocent face, at the trust in her eyes, and felt something crack in the armor of her certainty. Over the next 2 hours, as Emma slept fitfully in her hospital bed, Victoria made a series of calls. The first was to her head of security. "I want that footage," she said, her voice clipped, "all of it, from every angle." The second call was to her personal attorney. "I want to know if we have any liability here." The third call was to Margaret. "I want a full background check on the janitor, Marcus. I want to know everything. His employment history, his criminal record if he has one, everything." It was nearly midnight when Davidson arrived at the hospital with a laptop. He set it up on the small table in Emma's room, angling the screen away from the sleeping child. The footage was grainy but clear enough. Victoria watched as Emma, her blonde ponytail bouncing, ran through the lobby chasing a white butterfly. She watched as Emma's feet hit the slick marble near the ornamental fountain. She watched as her daughter's legs went out from under her and she fell, hard, her leg twisting beneath her. And then she watched as Marcus, who had been emptying a trash bin near the elevators, dropped everything and ran. His movements were not predatory. They were not suspicious. They were the movements of someone responding to an emergency. He skidded to a stop beside Emma, dropping to his knees. His hands hovered over her, clearly assessing, but he never touched her. His lips moved and Victoria turned up the volume. "Okay, sweetheart, you're okay. Don't move your leg. I know it hurts. I'm going to get help. Your mom is coming. You're not alone." His voice was gentle, reassuring, the voice of someone who understood fear. Victoria watched as he pulled out a radio from his belt and called for medical assistance. She watched as he stayed beside Emma, never touching her, just talking to her, keeping her calm. And then she watched herself burst into the lobby like an avenging angel, saw the way Marcus immediately backed away, saw the fear in his eyes when she accused him. The footage didn't lie. He had done nothing wrong. He had done everything right. And she had treated him like a monster. The background check that Margaret provided the next morning was equally damning. Marcus Reeves, 42 years old, widower, father of a 9-year-old daughter named Sophie, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket. He had been working as a maintenance engineer at Sterling Enterprises for 2 years. His previous employment was at a hospital where he had worked for 15 years. His supervisor had called him a model employee, reliable, quiet, kind. There was a note at the bottom of the report that made Victoria's chest tighten. Personal tragedy. Wife died of cancer 4 years ago. Has been raising daughter alone. Victoria sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside Emma's bed, staring at the papers in her lap. She had made a terrible mistake. She had let her fear, her protective instincts, override her reason. She had publicly humiliated a good man who had done nothing but try to help her daughter. The thought made her feel sick. She was Victoria Hartwell, the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, a woman who prided herself on her judgment, her decisiveness, and she had gotten this so completely, utterly wrong. Emma woke up around noon, her face still pale but her spirits lifting when she saw the pink cast on her leg. "Can I draw on it, Mommy?" "Of course you can, sweetheart." Victoria managed a smile, smoothing back Emma's hair. "Emma, I need to ask you something. When you fell, do you remember what the man said to you?" Emma nodded, her blue eyes serious. "He said I was brave. He said his daughter fell once too and she was okay. He said you would come because Mommy's always come. He was nice, Mommy." "Why'd you yell at him?" The question hung in the air between them, a child's simple honesty cutting through all of Victoria's justification. Victoria swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at her eyes for the first time since the whole ordeal began. "I made a mistake, baby. I thought he was hurting you, but he wasn't. He was helping you, and I was wrong to yell at him." Emma considered this with the solemn wisdom of a 6-year-old. "You should say sorry then. Grandma says we always have to say sorry when we're wrong." Victoria let out a shaky breath. "You're absolutely right. I should, and I will." But saying sorry was going to be harder than she thought. When Victoria returned to Sterling Enterprises the next day, leaving Emma in the care of her mother, she learned that Marcus Reeves had not shown up for his shift. He had called in, requesting a leave of absence. No explanation given. Victoria sat in her corner office, the city sprawling beneath her floor, 2 ceiling windows, and felt the weight of her mistake settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. She had done this. Her fear, her rush to judgment, had driven away a man who had done nothing but show kindness to her child. She picked up her phone and called Davidson. "I need Marcus Reeves's contact information." There was a pause on the other end. "Ma'am, I'm not sure that's appropriate." "I don't care about appropriate, Davidson. I need to apologize to him. Give me his information." Another pause. Longer this time. Then Davidson sighed. "I'll send it to your email. But ma'am, for what it's worth, I reviewed all the footage myself. The man did nothing wrong. Was a hero. not a threat. I know, Victoria said quietly. I know. The email arrived 5 minutes later. Marcus Reeves's phone number and home address. Victoria stared at the information on her screen, her finger hovering over the numbers. What would she even say? How do you apologize for accusing someone of something so terrible? How do you take back words that have been thrown like weapons? She thought of Emma's words. You should say sorry. Grandma says we always have to say sorry when we're wrong. Children made everything sound so simple. But Emma was right. Simple didn't mean easy. But it was still right. Victoria took a deep breath and dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. She was about to hang up when a voice answered. Hello? It was him. That same steady, calm voice from the lobby. For a moment, Victoria couldn't speak. Mr. Reeves, she finally managed. This is Victoria Hartwell. There was a long silence on the other end. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully neutral. Ems, Hartwell. How is your daughter? She's fine. Victoria forced the words out, her throat tight. A fractured tibia. She'll be in a cast for 6 to 8 weeks, but she'll make a full recovery. That's good. I'm glad she's okay. The relief in his voice was genuine, and it made Victoria's guilt twist deeper. Reeves, I need to apologize. I watched the security footage. All of it. You didn't do anything wrong. You helped my daughter. You kept her calm. You called for help, and I treated you like you were a threat. I'm so sorry. The silence that followed was heavy, weighted with things unsaid. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was quieter, more raw. Ems, Hartwell, I understand. I'm a stranger. You saw a man you didn't know near your hurt child. Any parent would have reacted the same way. But that's not true, Victoria interrupted. A good parent would have assessed the situation before making accusation. I didn't. I let my fear control me, and I hurt you in the process. I humiliated you in front of dozens of people. That was wrong, and I'm sorry. Another long pause. Victoria could hear the faint sound of a television in the background, children's voices. Then Marcus sighed, a sound that carried years of weariness. I appreciate the apology. I do. But to be honest, Ems, Hartwell, I don't think I can come back to Sterling Enterprises. I understand if you want to fire me, but I'd like to submit my resignation. The request is already drafted. Victoria's heart sank. No, please don't do that. This was my mistake, not yours. You shouldn't lose your job because I made an error in judgment. It's not about the job, Marcus said, and there was something in his tone that made Victoria listen more carefully. It's about what that moment showed me. I've spent 2 years trying to be invisible, trying to just exist without anyone noticing me, and in 1 second, all of that fell apart. Everyone saw me, everyone judged me, and it reminded me of something I've been trying very hard to forget. What? Victoria asked, though she wasn't sure she had the right to know that I don't belong in that world. Your world. The world of marble lobbies and expensive suits. I'm just the man who empties the trash cans. And sometimes that's all people see. The words hit Victoria harder than she expected. She thought of the hundreds of times she had walked past maintenance workers in her building without a second glance. The invisible army of people who kept her world running smoothly. She had never been cruel to them, but she had never really seen them either. Not as people with lives and families and pain. Not as anything more than functions. Mr. Reeves, she said slowly, carefully, I would like to make this right. Please, let me try. How? His question was simple but loaded with skepticism. You're a CEO. I'm a janitor. We live in different universes. What could you possibly do to make this right? Victoria stood up and walked to her window, looking down at the city below. I don't know yet, but I'd like to start by meeting with you in person, not as an employer and employee, just as 2 people. I owe you more than a phone call. There was a long, considering silence. Finally, Marcus spoke. I have to pick up my daughter from school in an hour. There's a coffee shop near PS 47, Moretti's. Do you know it? Victoria didn't, but she would find it. I'll be there at 3:30, is that okay? I'll be there, Marcus said and hung up. Victoria stared at her phone for a long moment, then called Margaret. Clear my schedule for the rest of the day. Tell the board I had a family emergency. Margaret, who had been Victoria's assistant for 5 years and knew better than to ask questions, simply said, done. Victoria grabbed her purse and coat and left the building, ignoring the curious stares from her executive team. She had her driver take her across town to a neighborhood she had never visited, a working-class area where the buildings were older and the streets were narrower. Moretti's Coffee was a small, worn-looking place with a faded awning and handwritten specials in the window. Victoria walked in and felt immediately out of place. Her Chanel suit and Hermes bag screamed wealth in a room full of tired parents and blue-collar workers grabbing afternoon coffee. She found a small table in the corner and sat down, ordering a black coffee from a waitress who looked at her with thinly veiled curiosity. She waited. 3:30 came and went. 3:40, 3:45. Victoria began to think he wouldn't show, that he had changed his mind, that she had pushed too hard. And then the door opened and Marcus walked in. He looked different out of his uniform. He wore jeans and a simple gray sweater, and he moved with a quiet confidence that she hadn't noticed before. He spotted her immediately and walked over, sliding into the seat across from her. Sorry, I'm late. Sophie's teacher wanted to talk about a project. No problem, Victoria said, realizing she meant it. She studied his face in the better light of the coffee shop. He had kind eyes, the kind of eyes that had seen pain but hadn't let it make them hard. The kind of eyes that had looked at her terrified daughter and known exactly what to say. So, Marcus said, wrapping his hands around the coffee mug the waitress had brought over, why are we really here, Ems? Hartwell. Please call me Victoria, and we're here because I want to understand. I want to know why you helped Emma, why you didn't just walk away." He looked at her for a long moment as if deciding whether she was worth the honesty. Then he spoke. "4 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It was aggressive. It took her in 6 months. Our daughter Sophie was 5 years old. She didn't understand why her mother was suddenly gone. She just knew that the most important person in her world had disappeared." Victoria's chest tight, Marcus continued, his voice steady but his eyes distant. "For a long time after Rachel died, I was just going through the motions. Getting up, feeding Sophie, getting her to school, going to work, coming home. I was alive, but I wasn't living. And then one day, Sophie fell at the playground. She broke her arm, and I saw this stranger, this complete stranger, run over to help her. He didn't know her. He didn't know me. He just saw a child in pain, and he helped." Marcus looked directly at Victoria. "That man reminded me that there's still good in the world, that there are still people who do the right thing without expecting anything in return. So when I saw your daughter fall, I didn't think. I just ran, because someone once did that for Sophie, and I wanted to be that person for another parent, for another child." Victoria felt tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked them back, refusing to let them fall in this public place. She had built a career on being strong, on never showing weakness. But this man, this quiet, grieving man, had just shown her a kind of strength she didn't possess. "I judged you," she said quietly. "I saw your uniform and I made assumptions about who you were, what you were capable of, and I was completely wrong." Marcus shrugged, a small gesture that somehow conveyed both pain and acceptance. "People see what they want to see. I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be," Victoria said fiercely. The intensity of her own emotion surprised her. "You shouldn't have to be invisible. You're not just a janitor, Marcus. You're a father. You're a man who has survived something I can't imagine. You're someone who runs toward emergencies instead of away from them. That matters. That means something." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since they sat down, she saw the hint of a smile. "You're not what I expected either. What did you expect?" Victoria asked, genuinely curious. He considered the question. Someone colder, I think. Someone who would send a lawyer with a check and call it settled. Someone who wouldn't care about making things right. She smiled sadly. "I thought about that, but my daughter told me I needed to say sorry. And she was right." They talked for another hour. Victoria learned about Sophie, who loved to read and wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. She learned that Marcus had worked at a hospital for 15 years, that he had been good at his job, but after Rachel died, he couldn't go back to a place so full of memories. She learned that he had taken the job at Sterling Enterprises because it paid well enough to support Sophie and it didn't require him to think. He could just exist. And Victoria found herself telling him things she rarely shared. About Emma's father, who had left when Emma was 2, claiming he wasn't ready for the responsibility of a child. About the crushing pressure of being a single mother and a CEO, of trying to be everything to everyone and feeling like she was failing at both. About the fear that consumed her every day, the fear that something would happen to Emma and she wouldn't be there to protect her. Marcus listened without judgment, without offering empty platitudes. When she finished, he simply said, "You're doing better than you think. Emma is loved. She knows that. That's what matters most." Victoria felt something shift in her chest, some tightly wound coil beginning to loosen. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding. For not hating me." "I don't hate you," Marcus said, his voice gentle. "I think you're just a mom who loves her daughter. Understand that better than anyone." They left the coffee shop together as the afternoon light began to fade. Outside, Victoria turned to him. "I'd like you to come back to work, not because I'm your boss and I'm ordering you, but because I think Sterling Enterprises is a better place with you in it. And I promise you, what happened in that lobby will never happen again. Not to you, not to anyone." Marcus studied her face, searching for sincerity. He must have found it because he nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll come back, but I have one condition." "Name it," Victoria said. "If you ever see me helping a child again, don't assume the worst. Assume that I'm just doing what I hope someone would do for Sophie." Victoria extended her hand, a formal gesture that somehow felt right. "Deal." They shook hands, and in that moment something passed, an understanding, a respect, maybe even the beginning of a friendship. As Victoria walked back to her waiting car, she glanced back and saw Marcus heading in the opposite direction, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders a little straighter than they had been when he arrived. She had come to this coffee shop to apologize, but she left feeling like she had received far more than she had given. She'd been given a glimpse into a life so different from her own, and she'd been reminded that beneath all the titles and the money and the power, they were just two people trying to survive, trying to raise their children, trying to make sense of a world that often made no sense at all. Marcus returned to Sterling Enterprises 3 days later. He arrived for his evening shift with the same quiet efficiency he had always brought to his work, but something was different. The other maintenance workers noticed it immediately. He held his head a little higher. His movements were less like someone trying to disappear and more like someone who had remembered he had a right to exist in the space he occupied. The day shift supervisor, a gruff man named Coleman, pulled him aside as he was signing in. "Reeves, glad you're back. We were short-handed without you." Marcus nodded his thanks and headed to the supply closet to gather his equipment. But as he moved through the building that evening, he became aware of something unsettling. People were watching him, not with the casual indifference he was used to, but with open curiosity. The story of what had happened in the lobby had spread through Sterling Enterprises like wildfire, growing and mutating with each retelling. Some versions painted him as a hero who had saved the CEO's daughter from a terrible fall. Others whispered that he had been accused of something something sinister and then cleared. A few claimed that Victoria Hartwell herself had publicly apologized to him, though no one could quite agree on the details. Marcus hated it. He had spent 2 years being invisible, and now he was the center of attention. As he mopped the floor near the executive elevators, a group of junior analysts walked past. One of them, a young woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, stopped. "You're him, aren't you? The janitor who helped Ms. Hartwell's daughter." Marcus kept his eyes on the floor. "Just doing my job. I heard she totally freaked out on you, like full mama bear mode." The woman's friend giggled. "And then she had to eat crow when she realized you were actually helping. That must have been so satisfying." Marcus straightened up, his jaw tight. There was nothing satisfying about a child getting hurt. "Now if you'll excuse me, I need to finish this floor." He moved away before they could say anything else, but the interaction left a sour taste in his mouth. He didn't want to be a story. He didn't want to be gossip. He just wanted to do his work and go home to Sophie. On the 40th floor, Victoria was working late in her office, the city lights glittering below her like a carpet of stars. She had tried to focus on the quarterly projections spread across her desk, but her mind kept drifting. She found herself wondering if Marcus had come back, if he was in the building right now, if he was being treated well by the other employees. She picked up her phone and called Davidson. "Is Marcus Reeves working tonight?" There was a pause. "Yes, ma'am. He clocked in at 6. Has there been any trouble? Any incidents?" "No, ma'am. All quiet." Victoria thanked him and hung up, feeling both relieved and oddly restless. She told herself she was just being conscientious, making sure a valued employee was being treated fairly. But there was something else. Something she couldn't quite name. A curiosity. A pull toward this man who had shown her daughter such unexpected kindness. She made a decision. She stood up, smoothed her skirt, and left her office. She took the elevator down, watching the numbers descend, and stepped out on the 35th floor. She walked through the dimly lit corridors, her heels clicking on the polished floors until she found him. Marcus was in the break room, methodically wiping down the counters and table. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face. "Ms. Hartwell, I didn't expect to see you down here. Victoria, please. And I wanted to check on you. Make sure your first day back was going okay." He set down his cloth and studied her. "It's fine. People are curious, but that's to be expected. They'll find something else to talk about soon enough." Victoria nodded, leaning against the doorframe. She suddenly felt awkward, unsure of why she had come down here. What did she expect? What was she looking for? "How's Emma?" Marcus asked, breaking the silence. "She's good. Frustrated with the cast already, but good. She asks about you." "Really?" There was genuine surprise in his voice. "What does she say?" "She wants to know if you're okay, if I made things right with you." Victoria smiled softly. "She's very worried that I hurt your feelings. She made me promise to be nice to you." Marcus laughed, a warm, genuine sound that transformed his face. "Tell her I'm fine, and tell her that her mom is very nice." Victoria felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest at his words. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Victoria spoke again, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Would Sophie like to meet Emma?" The question hung in the air between them. Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting it. "I just thought," Victoria continued quickly, feeling suddenly foolish, "that Emma would love to meet the daughter of the man who helped her. Or maybe it would be good for both girls. Sophie doesn't have many friends her age in our building. And Emma, well, she's been lonely since the incident. She's nervous about going back to school with the cast." Marcus considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Sophie would probably love that. She's been asking about Emma too. I told her about what happened and she's been worried. Kids are like that, aren't they? They care so much, so easily." Victoria nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "They do, so maybe this weekend we could meet at the park. Nothing formal. Just let the girls play." Marcus smiled, and Victoria realized it was the first real, unguarded smile she had seen from him. "That sounds really nice." They exchanged phone numbers, a simple gesture that felt strangely significant. As Victoria left the break room and headed back to the elevator, she felt lighter than she had in days. She told herself it was just about Emma, about giving her daughter a chance to thank Marcus properly and maybe make a new friend. But as she pressed the button for the 40th floor, she caught her own reflection in the polished steel doors and saw the small smile on her face. It wasn't just about Emma, and that realization both thrilled and terrified her. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather, clear skies, a gentle breeze, and the kind of crisp air that made everything feel possible. Victoria dressed herself and Emma in casual clothes, jeans and sweaters, felt oddly nervous as she drove to Riverside Park. Emma chattered excitedly from the back seat, her casted leg propped up on a pillow. "Do you think Sophie will like me, Mommy?" "Of course she will, sweetheart. You're very likable. What if she thinks my cast is ugly?" "Then she'd be wrong, because I think it's the most beautiful cast I've ever seen, especially with all those drawings you've been adding." Emma giggled, looking down at the rainbow of marker drawings that covered the pink fiberglass. She had drawn flowers and butterflies and stars, turning her injury into a canvas. They arrived at the park to find Marcus already there, sitting on a bench near the playground. Beside him was a girl with dark curly hair and her father's kind eyes, Sophie. She was wearing purple overalls and sneakers that lit up when she walked, and she looked up at them with open, curious interest. Emma immediately waved from Victoria's arms. Victoria had insisted on carrying her from the car, not wanting her to navigate the uneven ground on crutches. "Hi, I'm Emma. You must be Sophie." Sophie stood up, suddenly shy. "Hi, I like your cast." "Thanks. It's pink." "Pink is the best color." "I think so too," Sophie agreed, her shyness melting away. "My favorite shirt is pink. Do you want to see? She lifted her jacket to reveal a pink t-shirt with a sparkly unicorn on it. Emma's eyes went wide. I love unicorns. Me too. They're my favorite animal that's not real. Victoria and Marcus exchanged amused glances as the girls immediately launched into an animated discussion about unicorns, mermaids, and which mythical creature would win in a race. Victoria carefully set Emma down on a bench, making sure her casted leg was comfortable, and Sophie sat beside her, the two of them already chattering like old friends. Amazing how fast they connect, Victoria murmured, sitting down beside Marcus. Kids don't waste time on small talk. They just dive right into the important stuff, like which unicorn color is superior. Obviously purple, Marcus said with mock seriousness. Purple unicorns are clearly the most powerful. Victoria laughed, a genuine unguarded sound. Obviously. Though I've always been partial to silver unicorns myself. A classicist. I respect that. They sat together, watching their daughters, and fell into easy conversation. Marcus told her about Sophie's latest obsession with space, how she had plastered her bedroom walls with glow-in-the-dark stars and could name all the planets in order. Victoria shared Emma's newfound interest in baking, though most of their attempts ended with more flour on the floor than in the bowl. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from their children to their own lives, their struggles, their small victories. It was the kind of talk Victoria rarely had with anyone. In her world, conversations were strategic, purposeful, always leading somewhere, but this was different. This was just two people sharing the mundane details of their lives and finding joy in the sharing. An hour passed, then two. Sophie carefully helped Emma move to the grass, and the two girls spread out a blanket Marcus had brought. They played hand clap games, and Sophie taught Emma a complicated rhyme that involved both singing and intricate hand movements. Emma's laughter rang out across the park, pure and uninhibited, and Victoria felt her heart expand with a happiness she hadn't felt in months. Look at her, she said softly. I haven't seen her this happy since before the fall. She was so scared after it happened, nightmares every night, but right now she looks like herself again. Kids are resilient, Marcus said. They bounce back faster than we do. Sometimes I think Sophie has taught me more about healing than any therapist ever could. She just wakes up every day and be happy. It's that simple for her. Victoria turned to look at him. Is it that simple for you? Marcus met her gaze, and for a moment she saw past the calm exterior to the pain beneath. No, it's not. Some days are better than others. But being here, watching her play, seeing her smile, that makes it easier. You're a good father. Victoria's words were quiet but sincere. Sophie's lucky to have you. He looked away, but not before she saw the emotion in his eyes. Just doing my best. That's all any of us can do. They sat in companionable silence, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. And in that moment, surrounded by the sound of children's laughter and the rustle of autumn leaves, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt at peace. She felt like maybe, just maybe, the walls she had built around herself and Emma could come down just a little. Just enough to let in some light. The park visits became a weekend ritual. Every Saturday afternoon, weather permitting, Victoria and Marcus would meet with their daughters at Riverside Park. They found a particular spot under an old oak tree, where the grass was soft and the shade was perfect. Emma's cast came off after 7 weeks, and she celebrated by running in circles with Sophie, both girls shrieking with joy. Victoria watched from the bench, her heart full in a way she couldn't quite explain. These afternoons had become the highlight of her week, and she knew it wasn't just because Emma was happy. It was because she was happy too. Marcus had a way of making her feel seen, not as Victoria Hartwell, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, but as Victoria, just Victoria. A woman who loved terrible reality television, burned toast more often than not. A mother who sometimes felt overwhelmed by the weight of raising a daughter alone. A person who laughed at bad jokes and could talk for hours about nothing in particular. With him, she didn't have to be perfect. She could just be herself. And that was a freedom she hadn't experienced in longer than she could remember. They talked about everything. Books they had read, movies they wanted to see, childhood memories that made them laugh or wince. Marcus told her about growing up in a small town in Ohio, the middle child of 5, how he had dreamed of becoming a teacher before life took him in a different direction. Victoria shared stories of her own ambitious climb through the corporate world, the sacrifices she had made, the relationships she had lost along the way. One particularly crisp October afternoon, as the girls built elaborate leaf piles and jumped into them with abandon, Marcus turned to Victoria with a question that caught her off guard. Do you ever regret it? The career? The choices you made to get where you are? Victoria considered the question carefully. She had learned that Marcus asked things because he genuinely wanted to understand, not because he was making judgments. Sometimes, she admitted, when I miss Emma's school play because of a board meeting, when I realize I've been working so hard to build a future that I'm missing the present, then I think about the life I've been able to give her, the opportunities, the security, and I think maybe the sacrifice was worth it. Marcus nodded slowly. Rachel used to ask me the same thing. If I regretted all the overtime at the hospital, all the holidays I worked, I always told her I was doing it for our family, for Sophie's future. And then she got sick, and suddenly the future didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was the time we had left, and I had wasted so much of it trying to prepare for a tomorrow that never came. His voice had gone quiet, heavy with old grief. Victoria reached out instinctively and placed her hand over his. I'm sorry, I can't imagine what that was like. He looked down at their hands, hers pale and elegant against his calloused and work-worn. He didn't pull away. It taught me something, though. Time is the only thing we can't buy back. We can't earn more of it. We can't save it for later. We just have to use what we have while we have it. Victoria felt the truth of his words settle into her bones. She thought about all the times she had told Emma, maybe next time or I'll make it up to you. How many moments had she missed while chasing the next promotion, the next deal, the next accomplishment? Maybe I need to regret it more, she said softly. Maybe I need to change some things. The girls ran over then, breathless and covered in leaves, begging for hot chocolate from the park vendor. Marcus and Victoria stood up, brushing off their jeans, and walked with their daughters to the small cart near the park entrance. As they waited in line, Sophie slipped her hand into Marcus's and Emma did the same with Victoria. But then, in a gesture so natural it seemed choreographed, Sophie reached across and took Victoria's free hand while Emma grabbed Marcus's. The four of them stood there connected in a loose circle, and Victoria felt a sharp, sweet ache in her chest. This felt like family. This felt like home. And it terrified her because she knew how fragile it all was. That evening, after dropping Emma off with her mother for the night, Victoria returned to her penthouse and found herself pacing. She poured a glass of wine and stood at her floor, 2 ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering city. She was fallen for Marcus Reeves. The realization had been building for weeks, but tonight it crystallized into something undeniable. She was falling for a man who worked in her building, cleaned her floors, who existed in a completely different world than she did. The complications were endless. The potential for gossip was astronomical. If anyone at Sterling Enterprises found out that she was developing feelings for a member of the maintenance staff, it would be a scandal. The board would question her judgment. Her competitors would use it as ammunition. Her carefully constructed professional reputation could crumble overnight. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was the way Marcus looked at his daughter. The way he listened when Victoria spoke, really listened as if her words mattered. The way he had held her hand in the park and it had felt like the most natural thing in the world. She finished her wine and made a decision. She would be careful. She would keep whatever this was quiet and private, but she wouldn't walk away from it. Life was too short, and good things were too rare. She would see where this connection led. Consequences be damned. At least that's what she told herself in the brave solitude of her empty apartment. Monday morning arrived with a crisis. Sterling Enterprises was in the middle of negotiating a merger with a European firm, and the deal was falling apart. Victoria spent 12 straight hours in meetings, on conference calls, reviewing contracts and financial projection. By the time she emerged from her office, the building was nearly empty. It was after 10 at night. She was exhausted, hungry, and her head was pounding. She decided to walk to clear her head before calling her driver. As she wandered the empty 40th floor, she heard the familiar squeak of a maintenance cart. She followed the sound and found Marcus in the far conference room, methodically cleaning the long table where she had spent most of her day. He looked up when she entered, surprise crossing his face. "That makes 2 of us," Victoria said, leaning against the doorframe. "Tough day?" "The toughest. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I feel like I'd been in a boxing match and lost every round." Marcus set down his cloth. "Sounds like you need a break." Victoria laughed, but it came out bitter. "I don't have time for breaks. Not when there are millions of dollars on the line and hundreds of jobs depending on me making the right decisions." He studied her for a moment, then made a decision. "Come with me." "What?" "Just come on. Trust me." He led her down to the break room on the 35th floor. It was empty and quiet, the fluorescent lights giving everything a soft, surreal glow. Marcus went to the refrigerator and pulled out a brown paper bag. He set it on the table and unpacked it. A sandwich, an apple, and a small bag of chips. "This was my dinner, but I think you need it more than I do." Victoria stared at the simple meal. "When was the last time you ate?" Marcus asked. "Breakfast," she admitted. "Maybe I had coffee. That doesn't count. Sit. Eat." She sat, and he placed the sandwich in front of her. It was turkey and cheese on wheat bread. Nothing fancy, but when she took a bite, it tasted like the best thing she had ever eaten. Marcus sat across from her, watching with satisfaction as she devoured half the sandwich. "I have a question," he said after a few moments. "Why do you do it? The job, the pressure, what drives you?" Victoria set down the sandwich and thought about her answer. "When I was 25, I was an assistant to an executive who treated me like I was invisible. He would talk over me in meetings, take credit for my ideas, make me work weekends while he played golf. I swore that if I ever made it to the top, I would be different. I would be the kind of leader who saw people, valued them, who created opportunities for women like me who were fighting to be heard." "And have you?" Marcus asked. "Have you been that leader?" Victoria's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "I thought I had, but then I met you, and I realized I had become exactly what I hated. I walked past people like you every day and never saw you, never acknowledged you. You were invisible to me until you did something that forced me to see you. And I hate that about myself. I hate that it took a crisis for me to recognize your humanity." Marcus reached across the table and took her hand, his grip warm and steady. "But you did see me eventually. That counts for something. You apologized. You changed. That's more than most people in your position." She squeezed his hand, grateful for the absolution he was offering, even though she wasn't sure she deserved it. They sat in the fluorescent-lit break room, their hands joined across the table, and talked until midnight. They talked about their fears and their dreams, their regrets and their hopes. Marcus told her about the guilt he carried over Rachel's death, how he sometimes wondered if he had noticed the symptoms sooner, pushed harder for earlier treatment, maybe she would still be alive. Victoria shared her terror that she was failing Emma, that her daughter would grow up resenting her for choosing work over time together. They were two people carrying impossible burdens, and in that quiet room they set them down for just a little while. When Victoria finally left the building, Marcus walked her to her car. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him in the dim parking garage light. "For the sandwich, for listening, for everything." "Anytime," he said, and the simple sincerity in his voice made her chest tight. Victoria got into her car and watched in the rearview mirror as he walked back toward the building, his hands in his pockets, and she knew with absolute certainty that whatever was growing between them was real and significant and completely impossible to ignore. The whispers started in the third week of November. Victoria was in a board meeting when she first sensed the shift. The way Gerald Thompson, the head of acquisitions, kept glancing at her with something that looked like amusement. The way Diane Crawford from Human Resources seemed overly interested in her phone, typing furiously between agenda items. When the meeting ended, Victoria pulled Margaret aside. "Is there something going on that I should know about?" Margaret's face went carefully neutral, which was answer enough. "There's been some talk. Nothing official. Just gossip." "What kind of gossip?" Victoria's voice had gone cold, her CEO mask sliding firmly into place. Margaret hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Some of the staff have noticed that you've been spending time with Marcus Reeves, outside of work, and people are talking." Victoria felt ice settle in her stomach. How much are they talking? Enough that it reached HR. "Diane wanted to give you a heads up before it became a bigger issue. She's concerned about the optics." "The optics," Victoria repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. "Of what exactly?" "Of a superior fraternizing with a subordinate? You know the company policy, Victoria. Any romantic relationship between different levels of the hierarchy has to be disclosed and approved. And given the significant gap in your positions, it could be seen as inappropriate or even coercive." "I'm not coercing anyone," Victoria said sharp. "We're friends. Our daughters are friends. There's nothing inappropriate happening." Margaret gave her a look that was equal parts sympathy and skepticism. "Is that really all it is? Because if that's true, you need to make sure it stays that way, for both of your sakes." Victoria spent the rest of the day in a foul mood. She snapped at her assistant, was short with her department heads, and couldn't focus on anything. The merger negotiations that had consumed her attention for weeks suddenly felt trivial compared to the realization that people were watching her, judging her, making assumptions about her relationship with Marcus. That evening she called him. They had gotten into the habit of talking on the phone after their daughters went to bed, long, rambling conversations that could last hours. But tonight, her voice was tight when he answered. "We need to talk. What's wrong?" Marcus asked, immediately picking up on her tone. "People at work are gossiping about us, about the time we spend together. HR's concerned about the optics." There was a long pause. "I see. That's all you have to say?" Victoria's frustration bled through. "This could be a real problem, Marcus, for both of us. What do you want me to do?" His voice was calm, but she could hear the hurt underneath. "Do you want me to quit? Do you want me to stay away from you? Is that what would make this easier?" "No," Victoria said immediately. "That's not what I want." "Then what do you want?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Victoria closed her eyes, pressing her fingers against her temples. "I want people to mind their own business. I want to be able to have a friend without it turning into a scandal. I want my life to be my own and not subject to corporate policy and public opinion. But that's not the world we live in, is it?" "No," Marcus said quietly. "It's not. Especially not for you." "What does that mean?" "You're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Everything you do is scrutinized. Every relationship you have is analyzed. That's the price of the position you've worked so hard to achieve. And I'm just the janitor. Having coffee with me, spending time with me, it makes people question your judgment. It makes you look bad." "Don't say that," Victoria said fiercely. "You're not just anything. You're one of the best people I know. I don't care what other people think." "But you should care," Marcus insisted. "Your reputation matters, your career matters, and I won't be the reason you lose either of those things. So what are you saying?" Victoria's voice had gone small, vulnerable in a way she hated. "Are you saying we can't be friends anymore?" "I'm saying maybe we need to be more careful. Keep things more private, at least until the gossip dies down." The reasonable part of Victoria knew he was right. The part of her that had built an empire through careful strategy and calculated risk knew that discretion was the smart play. But there was another part of her, a part that had been dormant for years, that wanted to rebel against the constraints of her position, that wanted to tell the world she didn't care what they thought. That part lost. "Okay," she said finally. "We'll be more careful." The Saturday park visits became less frequent. When they did meet, it was at different locations farther from the city where the chances of being recognized were minimal. Their phone calls continued, but Victoria found herself paranoid, wondering if someone could somehow be listening, if her private conversations could become public ammunition. The joy that had characterized their friendship began to curdle into anxiety. Marcus felt the shift too. He became more reserved, more careful about what he said and how he said it. The easy warmth that had grown between them cooled into something more guarded. They were both trying to protect each other and themselves, but in doing so, they were losing the very thing that had made their connection special: the authenticity, the freedom to just be. Emma noticed the change first. One evening in early December, as Victoria was tucking her into bed, Emma looked up at her with those perceptive blue eyes. "Why don't we see Sophie anymore?" "We saw them last weekend, sweetheart. That was 2 weeks ago, Mommy. Before that was 3 weeks. Are you and MR? Marcus fighting?" "No, baby, we're not fighting. We're just busy." Emma's face crumpled. "I miss Sophie. She's my best friend, and I think you miss Mr. Marcus too. I see you looking at your phone all the time like you're waiting for him to call." Victoria felt her heart crack. Emma was right. She did miss Marcus. She missed the way he made her laugh, the way he listened without judgment, the way being around him made her feel like herself instead of a role she was playing. But she didn't know how to explain to her 6-year-old daughter that the world was complicated and cruel, that sometimes caring about someone meant staying away from them to protect. That night, Victoria couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything she had lost and everything she stood to lose. She had sacrificed so much for her career, time with Emma, relationships, her own happiness. And for what? So she could sit in an empty penthouse and worry about what people thought of her? So she could be so concerned with optics and reputation that she couldn't even maintain a friendship with a good man? At 2 in the morning, she got out of bed and went to her laptop. She pulled up Marcus's employee file, something she had looked at dozens of times since their first meeting. She studied his work history, his evaluations, his certifications, and then she saw something she had overlooked before. He had a bachelor's degree in education from Ohio State. He had teaching credentials. He was overqualified for his current position by miles. An idea began to form in her mind. It was risky. It might not work. But it was the only solution she could think of that might allow them to continue their friendship without the shadow of impropriety. The next morning, Victoria called an emergency meeting with her head of HR and her chief legal counsel. She laid out her proposal. Sterling Enterprises was expanding its corporate training program. She wanted to create a new position, Director of Employee Development, someone who could oversee training initiatives, mentor new hires, and help develop career pathways for all employees, regardless of their current positions. It was a role she'd been considering for months, she explained, though that wasn't entirely true. She had the budget, she had the need. What she needed now was the right person to fill it. "And you have someone in mind?" Diane Crawford asked, her skepticism evident. "I do. Marcus Reeves." The room went silent. Victoria continued before anyone could object. "He has a degree in education. He has teaching credentials. He's worked here for 2 years, and his performance reviews are exemplary. He understands this company from the ground up, literally. He knows what it's like to work in positions that are often overlooked. That perspective would be invaluable." "This is about the gossip, isn't it?" Diane said flatly. "You're promoting him to get ahead of the optics problem." "I'm promoting him because he's qualified and we need someone in this role," Victoria said firmly. "The fact that it also resolves a potential HR concern is a bonus, not the primary motivation." The legal counsel, a sharp woman named Patricia Simmons, leaned forward. "If you do this, it needs to be completely above board. We post the position. We interview multiple candidates. If Reeves gets the job, it's because he earned it on merit, not because of any personal relationship." "Agreed," Victoria said without hesitation. "That's exactly what I want." The position was posted internally that afternoon. Victoria didn't tell Marcus. She wanted him to find it on his own, to make his own decision about whether to apply. She didn't want him to feel pressured or obligated. She wanted him to want it. 3 days passed with no word. Victoria checked the application system obsessively, refreshing the page every few hours. Maybe he hadn't seen the posting. Maybe he had seen it and decided he wasn't interested. Maybe he thought it was some kind of pity offering and was too proud to accept. On the 4th day, Margaret knocked on her office door. Marcus Reeves just submitted an application for the Director of Employee Development position. Victoria let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Good. Schedule him for an interview with the full panel. Treat him like any other candidate. No special treatment. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "You do realize people are going to talk about this too, right? If he gets the job, they'll say you gave it to him." "Let them talk," Victoria said, and she was surprised by the steel in her own voice. "If he gets this job, it will be because he's the best person for it. And if people want to question that, they can take it up with me directly." The interview was scheduled for the following Monday. Victoria would not be on the panel. She had recused herself to avoid any appearance of bias, but she would see the footage later and review the notes. She spent the weekend anxious and restless, unable to focus on anything. Emma asked 3 times if she was feeling okay. On Monday evening, after the interviews had concluded, Diane Crawford came to Victoria's office. She set down a folder on the desk. He was impressive, very impressive. He has ideas about mentorship programs and career development that are exactly what we need. The panel was unanimous. If we offer him the position, he would be an asset to the company. Victoria kept her face carefully neutral. "So you're recommending him?" Diane studied her for a long moment. "I'm recommending him because he's qualified, but I'm also warning you, Victoria. If you pursue a personal relationship with him after this, even with him in a higher position, it's still going to be complicated. You're still his ultimate superior. The power dynamic still exists." "I know," Victoria said quietly, "but at least this gives us a fighting chance." chance. Marcus received the call on Wednesday morning. He was in the middle of replacing light bulbs in the 23rd floor corridor when his phone buzzed in his pocket. The voice on the other end was professional and warm. "Mr. Reeves, this is Patricia Simmons from Sterling Enterprises Legal Department. The interview panel has completed their deliberations and we would like to offer you the position of Director of Employee Development. Pending background checks and reference verification, we'd like you to start in 2 weeks. The salary and benefits package will be sent to your email within the hour. Congratulations." Marcus sat down on the floor, his back against the wall, the phone still pressed to his ear. He had applied for the position, half convinced it was some kind of test or trick. He had walked into that interview expecting to be humored and dismissed, but the panel had asked him serious questions. They had listened to his answers. They had treated him like a legitimate candidate, and now they were offering him the job. A job that would quadruple his salary. A job that would mean wearing a suit instead of a maintenance uniform. A job that would fundamentally change who he was in this building and in this world. "Thank you," he managed. "I accept." When he hung up, he sat in the empty corridor for a long time, just breathing. He thought about Rachel, about how proud she would have been. He thought about Sophie, about the opportunities this would create for her. Better schools, college saving, maybe even a house with a yard instead of their cramped 2-bedroom apartment. And he thought about Victoria, about the woman who had somehow seen past his uniform to the person underneath. He knew this opportunity was because of her, not in the way the gossips would claim, not because of favoritism or impropriety, but because she had believed in him enough to create a possibility where none had existed before. That evening he sat Sophie down at their small kitchen table. "Baby, I need to tell you something. Daddy got a new job." Sophie looked up from her coloring book, her eyes wide. "Are we moving?" "No, sweetheart. It's at the same company, but I'll be doing something different. I'm going to help people learn and grow in their jobs. I'm going to be a teacher, kind of like you always wanted," Sophie said, and the simple observation made his throat tight. "Yeah, like I always wanted." Her face split into a grin. "Does this mean we can still see Emma and Miss Victoria?" Marcus pulled her into a hug. "Yeah, baby, I think we can." He wanted to call Victoria immediately to thank her, to tell her what this meant to him, but he hesitated. He didn't want her to think he was only grateful. He didn't want this new position to create another wall between them when it was supposed to remove one. So instead, he sent a simple text message. "Thank you for believing I could be more than what I was." Her response came 3 minutes later. "You always were more. I just helped you remember." Marcus's final 2 weeks in maintenance were strange. His co-workers treated him with a mixture of admiration and resentment. Some were genuinely happy for him. Coleman, the day shift supervisor, clapped him on the back and told him he deserved it. But others, particularly those who had been with the company longer, muttered about favoritism and special treatment. "He's sleeping with the boss," one guy said, not bothering to lower his voice. "That's the only way a janitor gets an office on the executive floor." Marcus ignored them. He had spent 2 years being invisible. Another 2 weeks of being the subject of bitter gossip wouldn't kill him. On his last day, he cleaned the 40th floor one final time. It felt symbolic, closing this chapter of his life. He mopped the conference room where he had shared that late-night sandwich with Victoria. He wiped down the break room where he had prepared 1,000 cups of coffee he never drank. He emptied the trash bins and replaced the paper towels and turned off the lights. When he was done, he stood in the empty corridor and took a long look around. This had been his world for 2 years, a small world, a quiet world, but it had been his, and he had been good at it. Now he was stepping into something bigger and more uncertain, and he had no idea if he would be good at that too. Monday morning arrived with winter's first snow. Marcus stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. He had bought a new suit for the occasion, a charcoal gray that Sophie had helped him pick out. He looked like a different person. He looked like someone who belonged in the upper floors and meetings in a world of strategy and planning. He looked successful, but when he met his own eyes in the mirror, he saw the same scared kid from Ohio who had never quite believed he deserved good things. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "First day jitters?" Completely terrified, he typed back, "Good, that means you care. You're going to be amazing." Her confidence in him was a lifeline. He grabbed his new leather briefcase, kissed Sophie goodbye, and headed out into the snow. The office that had been prepared for him was on the 39th floor, one level below the executive suite. It was modest but professional, with a window that looked out over the city and a desk that was bigger than his kitchen table. His name was already on the door. Marcus Reeves, Director of Employee Development. He stood in the doorway, staring at those words, and felt tears prick at his eyes. He quickly blinked them away as Margaret appeared beside him. "Ms. Hartwell wanted me to make sure you had everything you needed. If there's anything missing, just let me know." She handed him a folder. "Your schedule for the week. You have meetings with department heads, a lunch with HR, and Ms. Hartwell would like to see you at 3 this afternoon to discuss your first quarter objectives." Marcus took the folder, his hand trembling slightly. "Thank you, Margaret." She gave him a knowing smile. "Welcome to the executive team, Mr. Reeves. We're glad to have you." The morning passed in a blur of introductions and information. Marcus met with the heads of marketing, operations, and finance. He toured the training facilities and reviewed the current employee development programs, which were sparse and outdated. He took notes furiously, already forming ideas about how to improve things. At 3 o'clock sharp, he took the elevator up one floor and walked to Victoria's office. Her assistant waved him through. Victoria was standing at her window, her back to the door, and for a moment he just looked at her. She was wearing a navy blue dress, and her hair was pulled back in a way that made her look both powerful and vulnerable. She turned when she heard him enter, and the smile that crossed her face was unguarded and genuine. genuine. Look at you, she said. A proper executive. How does it feel? Surreal, Marcus admitted. This morning I woke up in my apartment and for a second I thought I needed to put on my old habits. They'll fade. Come sit. They sat in the chairs by her window, not across her massive desk. Felt less formal, more like the conversations they used to have in break rooms and park benches. I wanted to check in, Victoria said. Not as your boss, but as your friend. How are you really doing? Scared, Marcus said honestly. What if I'm not good at this? What if I fail? Then you'll learn and do better, Victoria said. That's what growth looks like, but I don't think you're going to fail. I've seen your ideas, Marcus. The panel shared your interview responses with me. You have a vision for how to develop talent in this company. That's exactly what we need. Trust yourself the way I trust you. He met her eyes and something passed between them, something they had both been avoiding for weeks. Victoria, I need to say something. She nodded, her expression cautious. Before I took this job, before any of this, I need you to know that what I feel for you isn't about gratitude. It's not about what you did for me or for Sophie. It's about who you are, the way you love your daughter, the way you care about people even when you're scared, and the way you laugh at terrible jokes and eat sandwiches in break rooms at midnight. I care about you a lot. And I need you to know that before we navigate whatever this new dynamic is between us. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I care about you too, so much it terrifies me. But you know this is still complicated, right? You still report to me technically. The power dynamic still exists. I know, Marcus said, but maybe we can figure it out. Maybe we can be honest with each other and careful with everyone else. Maybe we can just take it one day at a time and see what happens. Victoria reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. One day at a time. I think I can do that. They sat there, hands joined, looking out at the city covered in fresh snow. It felt like a new beginning, not just for Marcus's career, but for both of them. And for the possibility of something real and lasting and worth fighting for. The gossip would continue. The complications would remain. But in that moment, none of it mattered. They had each other, and their daughters had each other. And that was enough to build on. That evening, Victoria picked up Emma from school and drove straight to Marcus's apartment. Sophie answered the door, her face lighting up when she saw Emma. The two girls immediately ran off to Sophie's room, their laughter echoing through the small space. Marcus emerged from the kitchen, an apron tied around his suit pants. I'm making pasta, he said sheepishly. It's nothing fancy. It's perfect, Victoria said. She looked around the apartment, really seeing it for the first time. It was small and the furniture was worn, but it was clean and warm and filled with evidence of love. Photos of Sophie and Rachel on every surface. Children's artwork covering the refrigerator. A blanket fort in the living room that looked half-constructed. This is your home, she said softly. I like it. Marcus looked at her standing in his tiny kitchen, this powerful woman in her expensive dress, and felt something settle in his chest. You want to help me cook? I should warn you, I'm terrible at it. So am I, Victoria admitted. Emma and I mostly survive on takeout and frozen dinners. Then we'll be terrible together. They cooked side by side, bumping elbows in the cramped space, laughing when Victoria oversalted the sauce and Marcus nearly set the garlic bread on fire. The girls set the table, arguing cheerfully about whether pink or purple napkins were better. When they finally sat down to eat, the four of them squeezed around Marcus's small table. It felt more like home than Victoria's penthouse ever had. Emma told a long, rambling story about her art class. Sophie demonstrated a new clapping game she had learned. Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances across the table, their eyes full of warmth and possibility and hope. After dinner, they did dishes together while the girls returned to their fort building. Victoria washed and Marcus dried, and in the comfortable silence she felt something shift. This was what she wanted. Not the luxury, not the success, not the corner office and the six-figure salary. She wanted this. Simple moments with good people, laughter and terrible cooking, and hands that weren't afraid to touch hers. She wanted Marcus. The first 3 months of Marcus's new position were a whirlwind of change and growth. He threw himself into the role with an intensity that surprised even Victoria. He redesigned the entire employee training program, creating mentorship pathways that allowed people in entry-level positions to advance. He instituted quarterly reviews focused not on criticism but on development opportunities. He personally met with employees from every department, from the mailroom to the executive suite, listening to their career aspirations and helping them map out realistic paths forward. The transformation he brought to Sterling Enterprises was remarkable. Employee satisfaction scores rose by 20%, retention improved. People who had been invisible, just as Marcus once was, suddenly had someone in leadership who saw them and invested in them. But success came with a price. Marcus was working 12-hour days, sometimes longer. He would arrive at 7 in the morning and leave after 8 at night. Sophie started complaining that she never saw him anymore. Their Saturday park visits with Victoria and Emma became sporadic, canceled at the last minute because Marcus had an emergency meeting or a training session that ran late. Victoria understood. She had lived that life for years, sacrificing time with Emma for the demands of her career. But watching Marcus make the same choices she had made filled her with a complicated mix of pride and concern. She was proud of what he was accomplishing. She was concerned that he was losing himself in the process. One Friday evening in late February, Victoria stayed late at the office working on budget projection. At 9 o'clock, she decided to call it a night. As she walked past Marcus's office on her way to the elevator, she saw his light still on. She knocked softly on the doorframe. He looked up from his computer, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "You're still here. So are you," he pointed out. Victoria walked into his office and closed the door behind her. "When was the last time you went home before midnight?" Marcus leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face. "I don't know. Tuesday, maybe? Sophie's staying with my sister this week. It's easier to just work when she's not waiting for me." "That's not healthy, Marcus. You're gonna burn out." "I'm fine," he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "I just need to finish this proposal for the board. It's due Monday and it's not ready." Victoria walked around his desk and looked at his computer screen. The proposal was good. It was actually excellent, but it didn't need to be perfect. It needed to be done. "This is ready," she said firmly. "Send it to the board and go home. It's not finished." "Yes, it is. You're just afraid to let it go because you're afraid they'll reject it. And if they do, you'll revise it. But you can't keep working yourself to death trying to prove you deserve to be here." "I do have to prove it," Marcus said, and there was an edge to his voice she had never heard before. "You don't understand. People look at me and they don't see Director of Employee Development. They see the janitor who got lucky. They see your charity case. Every single thing I do is scrutinized. Every decision I make is questioned. I can't afford to be anything less than perfect because the moment I slip up, they'll say I never deserved this job in the first place." Victoria felt her heart break for him. She knew that pressure. She had lived with it her entire career. The constant need to prove herself, to work twice as hard for half the recognition, to never show weakness or doubt. "You do deserve this job," she said softly. "But you're right. You'll never convince them. There will always be people who question how you got here. So you need to stop trying to prove anything to them and start remembering why you took this job in the first place." "Why did I take it?" Marcus asked, his exhaustion making him vulnerable. "Because you wanted to help people. Because you wanted to create opportunities for others like someone created one for you. Because you wanted to be there for Sophie and give her a better life. Not because you wanted to work yourself into the ground trying to earn the approval of people who will never give it to you." He stared at his computer screen for a long moment. Then with a decisive gesture, he closed his laptop. "You're right. I'm going home." Victoria smiled. "Good. And tomorrow you're taking the day off. Spend it with Sophie. Remember what matters." They walked to the elevator together, the building quiet and empty around them. In the parking garage, they stood beside their cars, neither quite ready to say goodbye. "Thank you," Marcus said, "for pulling me back from the edge. I was starting to forget who I was." "I know the feeling," Victoria admitted. "I spent years chasing success and forgot to chase happiness. I don't want that." She hesitated, then reached out and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. "I care about you too much to watch you disappear into your work the way I did." He caught her hand and held it against his face, his eyes closing. "Victoria, we should probably talk about this. About us." "We should," she agreed, "but not tonight. Tonight you need to go home and sleep. Tomorrow you need to be with your daughter. And then maybe if you have time you could call me. We could talk about what this is, what we want it to be." "I'd like that," Marcus said. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their first kiss was soft and tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling. "Go home, Mr. Reeves." "Yes, ma'am," he said with a grin, and she laughed at the playful formality. She watched him drive away, her heart full in a way it hadn't been in years. The weekend brought clarity and complications in equal measure. Marcus spent Saturday with Sophie, just the two of them. They went to the Science Museum and had lunch at her favorite pizza place and came home to build a model solar system that ended up lopsided and covered in glitter. Sophie was radiant with happiness, and Marcus remembered why he had taken the job in the first place. Not for the money or the title or the approval of strangers. For her. So she could have opportunities, so she could see that hard work and education mattered, so she could have a father who was present, not just physically but emotionally. On Sunday, Victoria brought Emma over. The four of them spent the afternoon at the park. Finally, after weeks of canceled plans, the girls played on the swings while Marcus and Victoria sat on their usual bench. "We need to talk about what's happening between us," Victoria said, watching Emma push Sophie higher and higher on the swing. "I know," Marcus said, "and I think we both know what this is. We care about each other, maybe more than care, but there are still complications. You're still the CEO, I'm still your employee, technically. And even though my position is different now, people will still talk. They already are. I heard two executives in the elevator this week speculating about our relationship." Victoria's jaw tightened. "What did they say? That you promoted me to keep me close? That we've been sleeping together since before I got the job? That Emma calls me daddy?" "That last one isn't even close to true, obviously, but the rumors are getting more elaborate." Marcus watched the girls, his expression thoughtful. "Does it bother you? What they're saying?" "It infuriates me," Victoria admitted. "Not because it's true, but because it reduces everything you've accomplished to gossip. You've transformed our training program. You've changed lives. And people want to act like the only reason you have your job is because of some imagined scandal." Marcus turned to look at her. "What do you want to do about it?" "We have three options. We can end this before it really begins. Keep things professional and pretend we don't feel what we feel. We can hide it, be careful, never be seen together outside of work contexts. Or we can be honest. We can acknowledge that yes, we care about each other, and no, it doesn't affect our professional judgment. And if people have a problem with that, they can take it up with HR." Victoria's eyes widened. "You'd be willing to go public?" "I didn't say it would be easy," Marcus said. "The scrutiny would be intense. For both of us. but I'm tired of hiding things. I spent 2 years being invisible. I'm not going back to that, not even for you. Victoria felt something fierce and warm bloom in her chest. Then we go public. Not in some grand announcement, but we stop hiding. We let people see us together. We let them draw their own conclusion, and if there are consequences, we face them together. They sealed the decision with a kiss, there on the park bench, in full view of anyone who might be watching. When they pulled apart, Emma was standing 3 feet away, her mouth hanging open. "Mommy, are you kissing Mr. Marcus?" Victoria felt her face flush, but she didn't let go of Marcus's hand. "Yes, sweetheart. Is that okay with you?" Emma's face split into the biggest grin Victoria had ever seen. "Does this mean Sophie's gonna be my sister?" "Not exactly, honey, but it means, Emma, Marcus and I are gonna spend more time together. All of us together." Emma ran to Sophie and grabbed her hand. "Sophie, our parents are kissing." Sophie's eyes went wide. "Does that mean we're gonna be a family?" The adults exchanged glances, both of them overwhelmed by the simple, hopeful logic of children. "Maybe," Marcus said carefully, "if that's something everyone wants. Is it something you want?" Emma asked, looking directly at her mother with those perceptive eyes that saw everything. Victoria looked at Marcus, at this man who had started as a stranger, become a friend, and was now something she couldn't quite put into words. Something important, something real. "Yes," she said, "I think it is." "Then it's settled," Emma declared with the absolute certainty of a 6-year-old. "We're going to be a family." Sophie cheered, and the two girls ran back to the swings, already planning their shared future with the boundless optimism of childhood. Marcus and Victoria sat on the bench, holding hands, watching their daughters play. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be gossip and scrutiny and complications they couldn't predict, but they would face it together. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The Monday after their decision to go public, Victoria and Marcus arrived at Sterling Enterprises together. They didn't make a show of it. They simply walked in through the main entrance at the same time, carrying coffee cups from the same shop, talking and laughing like the couple they were becoming. The reaction was immediate. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Phones came out to capture photographic evidence. By the time they reached the elevator, Victoria could feel the weight of dozens of stares. Marcus squeezed her hand briefly before they stepped into the elevator with 3 other employees who suddenly became very interested in their shoes. "Ready for this?" Marcus murmured as the elevator climbed. "Too late to back out now," Victoria replied with a small smile. By noon, the entire building was buzzing. Victoria's assistant Margaret fielded a dozen calls from board members wanting to discuss the situation. Diane Crawford from HR appeared at Victoria's office door with a concerned expression and a thick folder of company policy. "We need to talk," Diane said, closing the door behind her. Victoria set down her pen. "I assume this is about Marcus and me." Diane sat down across from her. "You're the CEO. He's a director-level employee. Technically, there's no direct reporting relationship, so you're not violating any explicit policy, but the optics are problematic. People are going to question whether his promotion was merit-based or influenced by personal." "They already are questioning it," Victoria said calmly, "and they're wrong." Marcus earned his position. The interview panel was unanimous. His work over the past 3 months speaks for itself. "I don't doubt that," Diane said. "But perception matters, especially for someone in your position. What do you want me to do?" Victoria asked, her voice taking on a harder edge. "End the relationship? Fire him? Pretend we don't care about each other?" "I want you to be careful," Diane said. "Document everything. Make sure there's a clear paper trail showing that any decisions involving Marcus go through proper channels. And maybe consider having him report to someone else on the executive team instead of falling under your division. It would create more separation." Victoria nodded slowly. "That's reasonable. I'll speak with Marcus about it." "And Victoria, off the record?" Diane's expression softened. "I think it's nice. You deserve to be happy. Just protect yourself. Protect both of you." That evening, Victoria invited Marcus to her penthouse for the first time. Emma was with her grandmother for the night, and Sophie was at a sleepover with a school friend. It was just the two of them, and the privacy felt both liberating and terrifying. Marcus stood in her living room, looking around at the minimalist furniture, the expensive art, the floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like a toy set. "This is where you live." His voice held a note of disbelief. "This is where I exist," Victoria corrected. "It's never really felt like home. Too big, too quiet, too perfect." She poured them both wine and they sat on the sofa, the space between them charged with awareness. "We need to talk about work." Marcus nodded. "I heard there were calls. Board members expressing concern. HR wants me to report to someone else. Remove the direct connection between us. How do you feel about that?" Victoria asked. "Honestly, relieved. I don't want people thinking I get special treatment because we're together. If reporting to someone else makes things cleaner, I'm fine with it." Victoria felt a wave of affection for him. "You're handling this better than I am. I keep wanting to call an all-staff meeting and tell everyone to mind their own business." Marcus smiled. "That would certainly be memorable, but maybe not the best PR strategy." They talked for hours, working through the logistics of their relationship, how to maintain professional boundaries at work, how to handle the inevitable gossip, how to protect their daughters from any backlash. The conversation was practical and necessary, but underneath it ran a current of something deeper. They were building a foundation, making plans, thinking about a future together. When the talking finally stopped, they simply looked at each other. Marcus reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Victoria's ear. "I never thought I'd feel this way again. After Rachel died, I was certain that part of my life was over." Victoria leaned into his touch. "I never thought I'd meet someone who saw past the title and the money to who I really am. You make me want to be a better version of myself." "You already are the best version of yourself," Marcus said softly. You just needed someone to remind you. He kissed her then, and this time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just the pure, simple rightness of two people who had found each other against all odds. The next 3 weeks were a delicate balancing act. At work, Victoria and Marcus maintained strict professionalism. They didn't meet behind closed doors without a third party present. They communicated about business matters through email with HR copied. Marcus began reporting to the chief operating officer instead of directly to Victoria. The new arrangement created the separation that Diane had recommended, and it helped quiet some of the gossip, but not all of it. There were still whispers in break rooms, still knowing looks in the elevator, still people who believed that Marcus's success was unearned and that Victoria's judgment was compromised by her feelings. The real test came from an unexpected source. Richard Brennan was a senior executive who had been with Sterling Enterprises for 20 years. He was old guard, someone who believed in hierarchy and traditional corporate structures. He had never liked Victoria's progressive policies, and he particularly disliked what he saw as her favoritism toward Marcus. During a quarterly executive meeting in mid-March, Brennan made his move. The meeting was reviewing departmental performance, and when it came time to discuss employee development, Brennan cleared his throat. I have some concerns about the direction of this department. He looked directly at Marcus. Your programs are expensive, Mr. Reeves. The mentorship initiatives, the training seminars, the career development workshops, they're eating up budget that could be better allocated elsewhere. Marcus kept his composure. The return on investment has been substantial. Our retention rates are up 23%. Employee satisfaction has increased across all demographics. We're spending less on recruitment because people are staying with the company. Those are soft metrics, Brennan said dismissively. What about hard numbers? What about productivity? What about profit margins? Marcus pulled up a presentation he had prepared for exactly this type of challenge. He walked the room through detailed analytics showing how improved employee engagement had led to increased productivity in every department. He showed cost-benefit analyses. He showed projections for long-term savings. He was prepared, professional, and unshakable. When he finished, the room was silent. Even Brennan had no immediate rebuttal. Victoria had watched the entire exchange without saying a word. She had forced herself to remain neutral, to let Marcus defend his own work. But now she spoke, her voice carrying the full weight of her authority. Mr. Reeves has presented compelling data. I see no reason to cut funding to employee development. In fact, I'm inclined to increase it next quarter. Any objections? She looked around the table. No one, not even Brennan, raised a hand. Meeting adjourned. As people filed out, Brennan paused beside Victoria's chair. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. Mixing business with personal feeling. It never ends well. Victoria met his gaze steadily. My personal life is none of your concern, Richard, and Marcus's work speaks for itself. If you have legitimate concerns about his performance, bring them to me with data. Otherwise, this conversation is over. After everyone had left, Marcus lingered behind. Thank you for not jumping. I needed to fight my own battle. I know, Victoria said. But it wasn't easy watching him go after you like that. Marcus moved closer. He's not the only one who thinks like that. There are others, and this is going to keep happening. I know, Victoria said. But we knew it wouldn't be easy. We can handle it, can we? Marcus asked, and there was doubt in his voice. What if it gets worse? What if it starts affecting our daughters? What if Emma or Sophie hears something at school? What if this puts your position at risk? Victoria stood up and took his hand. Then we'll deal with it, together. That's what being in a relationship means. We face the hard things together, but I need to know you're committed to this. Us. Because if you're having second thoughts, tell me now. Marcus pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. I'm not having second thoughts, I'm just scared. I'm scared of failing you. Of failing Sophie and Emma, of not being enough. You are enough, Victoria said fiercely. You've always been enough, and I'm scared too. I'm scared of losing you, but I'm more scared of living my life playing it safe and never taking a chance on something real. He kissed the top of her head, and I guess we're both scared together. They stood there in the empty conference room holding each other, drawing strength from the connection between them. Outside the windows, the city carried on with its millions of lives and dramas, but in that moment, their world consisted only of each other, and that was enough. That weekend, they made it official. Not with a press release or a company announcement, but with something more meaningful. They took Emma and Sophie to dinner at a nice restaurant, all four of them dressed up, and they told the girls that they were officially together, that they were building something serious, that the four of them were becoming a family. Not in the legal sense, not yet, but in the way that mattered most, in their hearts. The girls were ecstatic. They spent the entire dinner planning their future shared bedroom, debating whether they would have bunk beds or twin beds side by side, what color to paint the walls, and whether they could get a puppy. The adults exchanged amused glances over their enthusiastic chatter. Later, as they walked through the city streets, Emma holding Victoria's hand and Sophie holding Marcus's, with the two girls clasped together in the middle, Victoria felt something settle inside her. This was her family, imperfect and complicated and likely to face more challenges ahead, but it was real, it was hers, and she would fight for it with everything she had. The crisis came on a Tuesday morning in late April. Victoria was in her office reviewing contracts when Margaret burst through the door without knocking, her face pale. "Turn on the news." Channel 7. Victoria grabbed her remote and switched on the television mounted on her wall. The morning news was showing footage of Sterling Enterprises headquarters. A reporter stood in front of the building, her expression grave. "Breaking news this morning as allegations of workplace impropriety rock Sterling Enterprises. Sources claim that CEO Victoria Hartwell engaged in a romantic relationship with a maintenance worker, subsequently promoting him to an executive position without following proper hiring procedures. The company's stock has already dropped 3% in early trading as investors question leadership judgment." Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. The reporter continued, "We've obtained internal emails that allegedly show preferential treatment, including this one from Hartwell to her assistant requesting a meeting with Marcus Reeves, the employee in question, just days before the director position was posted. Critics are calling it a clear conflict of interest and demanding an investigation." Her phone started ringing. Then her second line, then her cell phone. Margaret stood frozen in the doorway. "What do you want me to do? Get Marcus up here now. And get our PR team and legal counsel in the conference room in 15 minutes. Also call the board chair. Tell him I'll have a statement within the hour." Victoria's mind was racing. Someone had leaked this story. Someone had taken legitimate business communications and twisted them into something sinister. Marcus arrived within minutes, his face tight with controlled panic. "I just saw. I'm so sorry. This is my fault." "This isn't anyone's fault," Victoria said firmly. "Someone is trying to sabotage us. We need to figure out who and why, but first we need to manage the fallout." The meeting with legal and PR was tense. They reviewed every communication between Victoria and Marcus since the day Emma fell in the lobby. They examined the hiring process for the director position. They pulled documentation showing the interview panel's unanimous decision. "Everything was above board," Patricia Simmons said. "There's no evidence of impropriety, but perception is reality in these situations. The fact that you're in a relationship now makes people assume the relationship influenced the hiring decision, even though the timeline doesn't support that." "What do we do?" Victoria asked. "We need to get ahead of this," the PR director said. "Full transparency. Release all the hiring documentation. Show the interview panel's notes. Make it clear that Reeves was qualified and that the decision was merit-based. We also need to address the relationship directly. Acknowledge it, explain the timeline, emphasize that proper protocols were followed. And I need to offer to step down," Victoria said quietly. Every head in the room turned to her. "If the board wants me to resign to protect the company, I will." "Absolutely not," Patricia said forcefully. "You've done nothing wrong. Stepping down would be an admission of guilt where there is none. It would destroy your career and accomplish nothing, but it might save Marcus's," Victoria said, looking at him. "If I'm gone, the story loses its power." Marcus stood up, his face set with determination. "No, I'm the one who should resign. I'm the one they're questioning. If I step down, the controversy ends." "You both need to stop," Patricia said. "Nobody is resigning. We're going to fight this with facts and documentation. Now let's get to work." The next 48 hours were a nightmare. The story spread across business news networks and social media. Anonymous sources came forward with increasingly elaborate claims. Some said Victoria and Marcus had been secretly involved for over a year. Others claimed Marcus had been given access to confidential information. A few even suggested Emma's fall had been staged to create their meeting. None of it was true, but the truth didn't seem to matter. The board called an emergency meeting. Victoria sat at the head of the conference table, every eye on her. She had prepared a detailed presentation showing the complete timeline of events, all documentation of Marcus's hiring, and third-party verification of his qualifications and performance. She spoke for 30 minutes, her voice never wavering, presenting facts with the precision of a surgeon. When she finished, the board chair, a silver-haired man named Edmund Hayes, leaned back in his seat. "Victoria, no one here doubts your integrity, but this has become a distraction that's affecting the company's stock price and reputation. We need to consider what's best for Sterling Enterprises." "What are you suggesting?" Victoria asked, though she noted. "We'd like you to take a temporary leave of absence. just until this blows over. Let someone else manage day-to-day operations while we conduct an independent review of the hiring process. It's not a punishment, it's protection. Victoria felt the walls closing in. A temporary leave was code for the beginning of the end. She would be sidelined while someone else ran her company, and when the review came back, even if it cleared her completely, the damage would be done. She would be the CEO who lost control, the woman whose personal life compromised her professional judgment. Everything she had built over 15 years would crumble. She opened her mouth to argue, to fight, but then she thought of Emma, of Sophie, of the life she was trying to build with Marcus. Was her career worth sacrificing all of that? Was her pride worth the continued damage to the people she loved? Before she could respond, the conference room door opened. Marcus walked in, followed by Patricia Simmons. "Mr. Reeves, you shouldn't be here," Hayes said. "This is a board meeting." "I know," Marcus said, "but I need to say something." Set a folder on the table in front of Victoria. "This is my resignation, effective immediately. I'm stepping down as Director of Employee Development." "Marcus, no," Victoria started, but he held up his hand. "Please, let me finish." He turned to address the board. "Everything in the news stories is designed to make it look like Victoria abused her position to benefit me. That narrative only works if I'm still here. If I resign, the story loses its power. Victoria remains CEO. The company's reputation is protected, and I go back to being nobody's problem. You don't have to do this, Edmund Hayes said, though his expression suggested he thought it was an excellent solution. Yes, I do, Marcus said quietly, because I love her, and I won't be the reason she loses everything she's worked for. The room fell silent. Victoria stared at him, tears threatening to spill over. This was the first time he had said those words out loud, and he was saying them in a boardroom full of executives while throwing away his career. Marcus looked at her, his eyes full of pain and love and resignation. You once gave me an opportunity when no one else would. You saw past my uniform to who I really could be. Now I'm giving you something back. Your company, your reputation, your future. He turned and walked out of the conference room before anyone could respond. Victoria sat frozen, the resignation letter in front of her, her heart breaking into pieces. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Well, Hayes said after a long moment, that certainly changes things. If Reeves is no longer an employee, the conflict of interest disappears. The story becomes about a man who was promoted on merit and then later developed a personal relationship with the CEO. That's a very different narrative. Victoria barely heard it. She was staring at the closed door, her mind replaying Marcus's words. Because I love her. She stood up abruptly. Excuse me, I need to address this. She left the boardroom and ran down the hall, her heels clicking frantically on the marble floor. She caught up with Marcus at the elevator. He was standing there, his shoulders slumped, waiting for the doors to open. Marcus. He turned to face her, and she saw the devastation in his eyes. It's okay, Victoria. I made my choice. No, it's not okay, she said fiercely. It's just sacrificed your career for me. Everything you've accomplished, everything you've built, I built it because of you. He said, and I'm walking away because of you, because some things are more important than a job title. But what about Sophie? What about the life you wanted to give her? I'll figure it out, I always do. The important thing is that you're protected. The elevator doors opened. Marcus started to step inside, but Victoria grabbed his arm. Wait. She turned and looked back at the conference room, then at Marcus, then at the elevator that would take him out of this building and out of this part of his life. She was at a crossroads. She could let him go, save her career, and spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been, or she could make a different choice. A choice that terrified her more than any board meeting or hostile takeover ever had. She let go of his arm. If you're walking away from this, then so am I. What? Victoria? No. Yes, she said, her voice growing stronger. You said some things are more important than a job title. You're right. Emma's more important. You're more important. Our family's more important. I've spent 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, and for what? So I could sit in that boardroom and watch them try to erase everything you've accomplished. So I could choose a company over the people I love? Marcus stared at her. You're not thinking clearly. This is your company, your life's work. No, Victoria said, and she felt a weight lifting from her shoulders with each word. This is just a company. My life's work is Emma, and now it's you and Sophie too. If they can't see that you earned your position, if they can't accept that we have a right to be happy, then I don't want to be part of this anymore. She stepped into the elevator beside him. What are you doing? Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. I'm walking out of here with you. And tomorrow, I'm tendering my resignation. We'll figure out what comes next together. The elevator doors closed, sealing them in. Marcus pulled her into his arms and she buried her face in his shoulder, letting the tears finally come. They had both just walked away from everything they had worked for. They had no plan, no safety net, but they had each other. And right now, that felt like enough. The apartment Marcus shared with Sophie had never felt so crowded or so full of life. Victoria had moved in temporarily while they figured out their next steps. Emma's things were scattered throughout the small space, mixing with Sophie's toys and book. The girls had claimed Sophie's room as their shared domain, and the sounds of their laughter echoed through the cramped quarters at all hours. It was chaotic and messy, and nothing like Victoria's pristine penthouse. It was perfect. The media storm continued for another week, but without Victoria as CEO and Marcus as an employee, the story lost its momentum. Sterling Enterprises issued a statement thanking Victoria for her years of service and wishing her well in her future endeavors. The business world moved on to the next scandal, but Victoria and Marcus were left to figure out what came next. They sat at the small kitchen table one evening after the girls had gone to bed, looking at their financial situation. Victoria had savings and a generous severance package. Marcus had some money set aside. They could survive for several months, maybe a year if they were careful, but then what? I've been thinking, Marcus said, tracing patterns on the table with his finger. About what you said, about your life's work being Emma, and how I walked away from the hospital because it reminded me too much of Rachel. We've both been running from things, avoiding things. Maybe it's time to stop running and start building something new. What did you have in mind? Victoria asked. I don't know exactly, but I know I'm good at helping people, and you're good at building things, leading things. Maybe there's something we could do together, something that matters. Victoria felt a spark of excitement, the first she'd felt since walking out of Sterling Enterprises. Like what? Over the next few weeks, an idea began to take shape. They talked to former colleagues, researched gaps in the market, and slowly assembled a vision. They would start a consulting firm focused on workforce development and organizational culture. Victoria would handle the business side, client relations, and strategic planning. Marcus would design and implement the training program. They would help companies create workplaces where every employee, from the janitor to the CEO, felt valued and scene. They would call it emerge consulting, because everyone deserves a chance to emerge from invisibility. They started small, working from the apartment, reaching out to their networks. Victoria's reputation, despite the scandal, still carried weight. People respected what she had accomplished at Sterling Enterprises. And Marcus's story, the janitor who became a director, resonated with companies looking to develop talent from within. Their first client was a mid-sized manufacturing firm struggling with high turnover. Victoria and Marcus spent a month embedded in their operations, talking to employees at every level, identifying problems and designing solutions. When they presented their recommendations, the CEO was impressed. This is exactly what we needed. Not some generic consulting package, but real insights from people who understand both the executive suite and the factory floor. Word spread. More clients came. Within 6 months, Emerge Consulting had a small team and a waiting list. Within a year, they had opened an office and were turning down work because they couldn't keep up with demand. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Victoria had resigned as CEO of a Fortune 500 company and somehow ended up happier and more fulfilled running a startup out of a renovated warehouse space. Marcus had walked away from a prestigious position and found his true calling helping other people find theirs. On a sunny Saturday in October, exactly 18 months after that day in the lobby when Emma fell and everything changed, Victoria and Marcus stood in the backyard of their new house. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a penthouse. It was a 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and a big oak tree perfect for a tire swing. Emma and Sophie ran around the yard chasing each other and laughing, their voices carrying on the autumn breeze. The moving truck had just left. Boxes were stacked everywhere. The chaos of blending 2 households into one was just beginning, but none of that mattered because they were home. They were together. They were a family. Victoria's mother arrived with casseroles and opinions about where the furniture should go. Marcus's sister came with her husband and kids, and suddenly the house was full of noise and life and love. They ordered pizza for everyone and ate sitting on the floor because they hadn't unpacked the dining table yet. Emma and Sophie gave tours of their shared bedroom, proudly showing off the bunk beds they had finally agreed on after months of debate. As the sun began to set and the relatives started to leave, Victoria found Marcus standing in the doorway to the backyard, watching the girls play in the fading light. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Happier than I ever thought I'd be again," he said, turning to face her. "I keep thinking about that day in the lobby. If Emma hadn't fallen, if I hadn't been there, if you hadn't yelled at me, none of this would have happened. We wouldn't have found each other." Victoria smiled. "I think we would have found each other eventually. Some things are just meant to be." Marcus kissed her softly. "I love you. I should have said it somewhere more romantic than a boardroom in front of your board of directors, but I love you. I loved you then and I love you now." "I love you too," Victoria said. "And for what it's worth, I thought the boardroom declaration was pretty romantic, very dramatic, very you." They stood there in the doorway of their new home, holding each other as the sky turned pink and gold. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "Walking away from Sterling, giving up everything you built?" Victoria considered the question seriously. "Not for a second. I thought that company was my identity. I thought the title in the corner office defined who I was, but they didn't. This defines who I am. You and Emma and Sophie are family. Our business that actually helps people instead of just making money. This messy, chaotic, beautiful life." She pulled back to look at him. "What about you? Any regrets?" Marcus shook his head. "I spent 2 years trying to be invisible, and then you saw me. Really saw me. You gave me back my life, Victoria. Everything that's happened since has been a gift. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts, because they led us here." Emma and Sophie came running up, breathless and grass-stained. "Daddy, can we have a camp out in the backyard tonight?" Sophie asked. "Please, please, please," Emma added, bouncing on her toes. Victoria and Marcus exchanged glances. "We don't have a tent," Marcus pointed out. "We can use blankets," Emma said. "And Ms. Margaret gave us flashlights." "Come on, it'll be fun," Victoria laughed. "You two have this all planned out, don't you?" They nodded enthusiastically. Marcus looked at Victoria. "What do you think, boss?" "I think," Victoria said, crouching down to the girls' level, "that a campout sounds perfect." The girls cheered and ran off to gather supplies. Marcus helped Victoria stand back up. "Did you just call me boss?" Victoria asked with a raised eyebrow. "Force of habit," Marcus said with a grin. "Though technically we're partners now. Equal partners. The best kind." Victoria agreed. They spent the evening building a blanket fort in the backyard. Marcus strung lights from the tree branches. Victoria made hot chocolate that was mostly marshmallows. The girls told ghost stories that weren't scary at all. And when it got too cold and the mosquitoes came out, they all moved the camp out inside to the living room floor. They fell asleep in a pile of blankets and pillows, the 4 of them tangled together like they'd always been a family. In the morning, Victoria woke first. She lay there in the soft dawn light, looking at her sleeping family. Marcus with his arm around Sophie, Emma curled up against her side. This was her empire now, not a corner office or a Fortune 500 company. These people, this love. 6 months later, Emerge Consulting was featured in a business magazine. The article was titled "From Janitor to CEO: How One Couple Redefined Success." It told their story, from that day in the lobby, to the scandal, to their decision to walk away and build something new. The article ended with a quote from Victoria. "We thought success meant climbing to the top of the corporate ladder, but real success is about lifting other people up. It's about creating opportunities and seeing potential where others see limitations. It's about building a life that matters, not just a career that impresses people. And sometimes the biggest risk you can take is choosing love over everything else, because in the end, love is what lasts. Everything else is just noise." The article went viral. Their client list tripled. But more importantly, they started receiving emails from people all over the country. People who had been invisible in their own workplaces. People who had been told they weren't good enough or smart enough or qualified enough. People who needed to hear that their story could change, that they could emerge from the shadows and become something more. Marcus read every email. Victoria responded to everyone. They hired more consultants, expanded their services, and turned Emerge Consulting into something bigger than either of them had imagined. But at the end of each day, they still came home to the house with the oak tree. They still had family dinners at the table they'd finally unpacked. They still tucked two little girls into their bunk beds and read them stories about princesses and dragons and heroes who were just ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And on quiet Sunday mornings, when the girls were still asleep and the house was peaceful, Marcus and Victoria would sit on the back porch with their coffee and watch the sun rise. They would talk about their week, their clients, their dreams for the future, and sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined, grateful for the fall that had brought them together, grateful for the courage to choose love when the world told them to choose ambition, grateful for second chances and new beginning, grateful for the moment when a CEO yelled at a janitor and accidentally found her soulmate. That's a wrap on this story. Two people from different worlds who discovered that love doesn't care about titles or tax brackets or what other people. It only cares about two hearts that recognize each other and refuse to let go. And sometimes the greatest success isn't reaching the top of the ladder. It's having the courage to climb down and build something better on solid ground with the right person by your side.